Hello! Welcome to the podcast, There Is No Spoon. We continue exploring Jordan Peterson's second rule for life. In the previous episode, we discussed the concepts of order and chaos and how the balance between them affects our lives. Now, I would like to move on to the next idea, from which the title of this rule essentially grew. Let me remind you of it. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Many people are familiar with a fundamental Christian principle, embodied in Kant's categorical imperative. Act toward others as you would want them to act toward you. This principle is often interpreted as the need to be kind and pleasant to others and to try not to cause them suffering. As Peterson rightly points out, that is not entirely true, or rather, it's only partially true. He writes, "If I am someone's friend, family member, or lover, I am morally obliged to bargain for my own interests as diligently as they do for theirs. If I fail, I become a slave, and the other person becomes a tyrant. What good is that? It is much better for any relationship when both partners are strong. Endless acceptance and forgiveness may work in the case of a parent and child, but it seems strange in adult relationships of any kind, since all relationships are interactions between two personalities." I want to emphasize this thought again, because in a way, it goes against today's pseudo-psychological discourse. Acceptance of difference is normal and reasonable. It acknowledges that we are all unique. Here, we can quote the famous phrase by Evelyn Hall, often attributed to Voltaire. "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." But this difference can, and should, create tension. And it is precisely in this tension that synthesis is born. To deny this difference, to suppress it, to reject it, this is harmful not only to yourself, but also to the other person, because by doing so, you deprive them of a point of growth, an opportunity to see the world through your eyes. What would you want from your loved ones, friends and partners? That they always tell you what you want to hear and do, only what you like, or that they treat you well while maintaining their own worldview and acting in accordance with it, adjusting for your relationship, of course, though most likely this adjustment will already be part of their worldview. If we aim for growth and for walking the narrow path, then we should follow the categorical imperative in relation to others as well, protecting our individuality and our view of the world. Because if we stop doing this with others, we will also stop doing it for ourselves. Act toward others as you would want them to act toward you is about living in truth, inseparable not only from your inner world, but also from your personality, and, as a consequence, from your actions. From this follows an important implication. Being capable of forgiveness, we often forgive others. But following the categorical imperative, if we want others to accept our forgiveness, we must allow for the possibility of forgiveness for ourselves, both from others and from ourselves. And this last point, in many ways, should be the first step, because if we do not forgive ourselves and do not allow forgiveness toward ourselves, we cannot accept the other. It may seem, especially in the current situation, that there is a lot of evil in the world, particularly the kind caused by human beings themselves. The problem of evil constantly surfaces in public discourse. Its roots lie in an old argument against the existence of God, the argument from the existence of evil. However, there is an important distinction. While philosophy often deals with natural evil, for example, natural disasters, psychology faces the problem of evil in the context of human relationships. In other words, why do even good people commit evil? First of all, it's important to note that things are not as bad as they seem. It feels like there is a lot of evil because our brain is wired to easily remember and highlight negative events while overlooking positive ones. But in reality, that's not the case. This becomes clear if you analyze historical facts, or simply take an unbiased look around. Every day, ordinary people perform actions that could be considered heroic by some standards, yet we have started to treat them as routine. For example, a stranger smiles at you in a crowd, despite their own struggles. A waiter asks how you are doing. A friend calls, and you talk about something important, or simply about everyday things. You ask someone for a small favor, and they help you. Or you just come home and sink into your familiar, comforting routine, realizing that while difficulties may exist elsewhere, here and now, everything is fine. Each of the people you interacted with today probably had plenty of reasons to behave much worse. But they didn't, and that does them credit. Here's what Peterson writes. I believe that this kind of everyday heroism is the rule rather than the exception. Most people are dealing with one or more serious health problems while working hard and not complaining. Anyone fortunate enough to be in a rare period of personal health and well-being usually has at least one close family member going through hard times. But most of the time, people keep doing difficult, demanding tasks to keep themselves, their families, and society afloat. To me, this is a miracle that deserves nothing but admiration and gratitude. So much could fall apart and stop working, but wounded people keep holding everything together. They deserve sincere and heartfelt admiration. This is an ongoing miracle of resilience and perseverance. In fact, we can expand this perspective beyond people to the world as a whole. For instance, the sun comes up in the morning, giving you a chance to take a walk in the park. Or you go out for a meal, and the food turns out to be delicious. Isn't that a positive event? In this context, I really like the Zen approach called beginner's mind, where we deliberately learn to marvel at even familiar things. It allows us to see what has long become routine and taken for granted as something new, and in many ways, positive. Why does this matter? Because it's closer to the truth than what our mind tends to paint. The world has both good and evil, and there's plenty of both. We just need to learn to see it. Peterson writes, humanity as a whole, and the individuals who make it up, deserve a bit of sympathy for the terrible burden we stagger under. They deserve sympathy because of their vulnerability to death, state tyranny, and nature's violence. No animal has ever faced such an existential situation. It is a weight only God can fully bear. This sympathy should be a good antidote to the self-contempt conditioned by self-consciousness, which has its justification, but is only half the real story. Self-hatred and hatred of humanity must be balanced with gratitude for tradition and the state, as well as with wonder at what ordinary, normal people accomplish. And that's not even mentioning the astonishing achievements of extraordinary individuals. We deserve some respect. You deserve some respect. You matter to other people as much as you matter to yourself. You have an irreplaceable role in the destiny of the world. Therefore, you have a moral obligation to take care of yourself. You must care, help, and do good for yourself, just as you would care, help, and do good for someone you love and value. This means you must consistently act to ensure respect for your own being. And that is entirely fair. Finally, you can ask yourself a few questions to understand your life situation. Where are you right now? Knowing this, you can map out a route to start limiting and structuring the chaos you may be in. What will my life look like if I begin to follow the categorical imperative and allow goodness not only toward others, but also toward myself, from others, and from myself? The answers to these questions, in fact, lead us straight to Peterson's second rule. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. This was the podcast, There Is No Spoon. Until next time.